Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Phil Kidd, a proud City Club member and founding committee member of the City Club of the Mahoning Valley, which is a new chapter of the City Club of Cleveland, which Dan had mentioned earlier. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you a voice from the Valley, State Senator Joe Schiavoni, Democratic candidate for Governor of Ohio. Today continues our ongoing efforts here at the City Club to put you in a conversation with the people shaping the future of our state and the people who hope to lead it. In the last year, we have hosted Secretary of State John Husted, who has announced his candidacy for the governor's office, and Attorney General Mike DeWine, who has all but announced the same. Since that time, the list of gubernatorial contenders has grown to 9. Senator Schiavoni was the first to officially announce his candidacy for governor back in March. Let me tell you a little bit about Senator Schiavoni. A Mahoning Valley native, Senator Schiavoni grew up on the south side of Youngstown before moving to Boardman, where he graduated from Boardman High School. Youngstown has a long and proud tradition in the sport of boxing, and taking after his father, Mr. Schiavoni spent a great deal of his free time as a young man in the boxing ring, winning the Golden Gloves tournament in Youngstown in 1995. He attended Ohio University, where he worked towards his degree, while spending his summers back home in the Mahoning Valley working at a local butcher shop. He went on to law school, earning his law degree from Capital University. Following in the footsteps of his grandfather and father, he went to work representing injured workers at the law firm of Schiavoni, Bush, and Muldowney. In 2008, Mr. Schiavoni was appointed to a vacant seat in the 33rd District of Ohio Senate, which encompasses all of Columbiana and Mahoning counties. He was elected to a full 4-year term in 2010 and re-elected in 2014. In 2013, Senator Schiavoni's colleagues unanimously elected him the minority leader. He had previously served 2 years as Assistant Senate Democratic leader. Back home, Senator Schiavoni remains active in the community. He is a member of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of the Mahoning Valley, the Mahoning County Bar Association, Curbstone Coaches, the local Farm Bureau, the Boardman Civic Association, Italian American Education Foundation, and the Legends of Leather Boxing Organization. Senator Schiavoni and his wife Margaret reside in Boardman with their young sons, Louis and Dominic. And just on a personal note, I work in the field of community development, and I was also a city official in Youngstown. And over the years, Senator Schiavoni has been incredibly helpful with a number of initiatives, one of which that I think Cleveland can relate to is he helped us establish our county land bank, which at the time was not necessarily a foregone conclusion. Cuyahoga County had kind of been the pilot for 2 years, and we were really pushing the state legislature to be able to do that in the other counties, particularly Mahoning County, because much like Cleveland, those same housing-related issues are very relevant to Youngstown and Warren. So that was incredibly helpful, and he's worked on a number of different issues, which he's going to share with you today. He also served as a panelist at our recent City Club of Mahoning Valley Forum on public education with some officials from Cleveland here. So very collaborative individual, and I often make the joke back in Youngstown that I feel like I have more access to Senator Schiavoni than I do my own council person oftentimes. I can pick up the phone and I know within 5 minutes I'm probably going to get a call back from Joe. And that's a testament to, I think, his passion for the work that he does and the sincerity that he brings just as a person to everything that he's done. So it's my privilege and my honor today to introduce State Senator Joe Schiavoni.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you. We got to get some guys with hair up here. 3 in a row. All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you today. As Phil said a couple months ago, I was honored to have the opportunity to speak at the Mahoning Valley City Club. And I was so appreciative when Dan came up to me and asked me if I would be a guest here today. And when I read about the history of this venue, I started feeling my heart race a little bit. Being on the same stage of past presidents, same stage as social justice reform advocates. And then after reading the creed of the club, I began to feel the importance of the 100+ years of conversation and debate that has occurred on this stage. I appreciate the fact that I can now be a part of this group. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about myself so that we can kind of get to know one another, right? So I'll talk and explain to you why I'm here today, and then hopefully we can have some good questions, some good dialogue on the back end of this. You know, I grew up in Youngstown, as Phil said, and many people make different assumptions about my hometown, but it's a community that I love, and the community has molded me into the person that I am today. I grew up in Youngstown, and I learned that you don't take anything for granted, that you're always thankful and appreciative for what you have, and you treat people the way that you want to be treated. You know, I was born in arguably the worst year in the history of Youngstown, right? The year that all the steel mills closed. So I wasn't around for the good old days that a lot of the old timers will talk about, where you can walk from one steel mill to the other and everybody had some money in their pocket and everybody was able to pay for their college education. I didn't see a lot of that, because when I was born and I was growing up, I saw a lot of shuffling, I saw a lot of despair, I saw a lot of blight, I saw a lot of crime in the city. And I just thought that's how it was. But through that, I saw a lot of pride in community. I saw a lot of perseverance, and I saw a lot of love for family. And that pride is translated into new generations of leaders like Phil Kidd. You know, Phil Kidd was one of the first guys that I met. He used to sell T-shirts that said, "Defend Youngstown," out of the courthouse when I was working as a young attorney. And he worked tirelessly on blight removal and revitalization of our city. And now Youngstown has finally begun to turn the corner towards a brighter future. But continued collaboration is necessary in order to make sure that we get the job done. You know, growing up, I learned the value of hard work, perseverance, and respect. You know, I think about when I was younger, my grandfather, my dad's right here, but my grandfather, who also worked as an advocate for workers' comp clients, he took me to the courthouse when I was young. And I remember as we were walking down the hallways, he treated every single person in that building with the same amount of respect, whether it was the guy cleaning the floors or the judge that he was going in front of. And that I was so impressed by the fact that everything was just very casual. The relationships were so real and genuine, and I never forgot that. You know, I worked in a butcher shop during high school and during college and during law school, and I learned a couple of things there. You know, I learned that a lot of those people that I worked with every single day, you know, that was their means in order to provide food for their family, in order to make ends meet. For me, I was just a 15, 16, 7-year-old kid that my mom would drop me off. She would pick me up in a reliable car. I had dinner when I would come home. My dad would come home and we would all sit, me and my 3 younger brothers, and we would talk about what happened on that particular day. But when I went back to work after school every day, I saw the perspective of what it's really like to go to work every single day and barely scrape by in the Mahoning Valley. You know, working at a steel fab shop in the summer after my first year of college, you know, I was real excited. I came back from school and I thought to myself, man, I got a 3.5. My dad's going to be real proud of me. And my dad's like, "Hey, I found you a job this summer." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, what is it?" He's like, "You're working at this steel fab shop. It's called Fab Art. It's on Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's going to be a great job for you this summer." I'm like, okay. All my friends were going to Hilton Head. They were going to go work as waiters down there. They were going to go work as caddies on golf courses. The first day I go in there, it's like 115 degrees. They have me grinding metal burrs off these triangular parts that go on the back of trucks. So I went home and I thought, what I do to deserve this? You know, I'm working. I thought I did good this year. But, you know, it's all part of the deal, right? You got to work hard to realize how lucky and fortunate you are. And I learned so much about hard work, and I learned so much about building those relationships with the people in my valley. And it was something that I would never want to exchange. You know, it was something that I just learned a great deal about. And boxing throughout high school, you know, I went down and my dad fought, and so I thought that, you know, this is something that I was going to do too. So I went down there and I went down to the gym. You know, it's tough. It's tough. You know, I wrestled, I boxed. I learned that you have to push yourself to the limit, and you gain so much strength from bringing yourself to that brink every single day. And so I had fights in Youngstown, I had fights in Aliquippa, I had fights in Erie, I had fights in Steubenville, and it was a great experience for me. You know, it taught me that you can push yourself so much further than you think you can. And then I went on to college and to law school. And in college, I did well, but I didn't study quite as hard as I probably should have. And I realized that the first day of law school, I realized how smart every single person was like these guys. I wouldn't want to, match up against you guys in a debate. So it's serious business when you get into those grad school programs and into law school. But we grinded it out. We worked hard, came back home, worked with my dad. And I think about those first hearings that I had as a workers' comp lawyer. My dad would bring me down to the Industrial Commission, and I would watch him, and I would watch how he treated the person that he was representing. And I think there's a lot of stereotypes about lawyers. A lot of them are real. That some of these lawyers, they don't care about their clients. They're just in there to make $1, right? And I would see some of these lawyers, they go talk to their client for 5 seconds, and then they go read the newspaper in a seat that was 4 seats over, but there was a divide. Like the workers sat here, the lawyers sat here. But my dad never did that. He sat with the client until they called the person's name in order to give that person a feeling that you're on the same team. I'm here to advocate for you. I'm here to work for you. I care about you because I'm here with you, and I want to show you that. So I tried to do that every single day throughout working down in the Industrial Commission, and that was something that meant a lot to me, being able to go down there, work as hard as I can every single day for these folks that desperately needed it. And it was no joke. You're talking about putting food on people's tables, paying bills. There's a lot of lawyers in here that I know and I've worked with, and I know that they do the same thing. And that's why I appreciate the fact that you're also here. I decided when I first came home that I was going to work in the Big Brothers program and mentoring somebody that, didn't have anybody in his life and matched up, 12-year-old kid that wouldn't even look at me, barely wanted to talk to me. It took a lot of work. And now he's 23 years old, and he has a kid of his own. He's working as a security guard at a local prison in our area, local jail in our area, and he has come so far, not because of what I've done, but maybe I just had a little piece of that, right? In life, you have to help people and give them the things that they might not have, and you want them to do the same for you. And so that's something that's very powerful for me. And now I have 2 boys of my own. I have a beautiful wife at home. She's a nurse. She works one day at the Cleveland Clinic here and a couple days at the local surgery center. And I think about all of the sacrifice that my mom made for me and my 3 brothers growing up while my dad was working and trying to get his footing as a new lawyer. And I try to bring that to my own family. And so I didn't plan on a life in politics. I wasn't the kid in kindergarten that said that I wanted to be president of the United States. Okay, I'd be lying if I stood here and told you that this was all in the plans, right? But what happened in 2008, there was an opportunity for me to make a difference. There was an opportunity for me to join the Ohio Senate. And so I pushed for the application process, and I was appointed first because the current state senator ran for Congress in the middle of his term. And I was told by all the political insiders and all the people across the district, because I didn't know any of them, that they were going to primary me and they were going to beat me, right? And I said I would take their calls, and I'd be very nice, and I'd say, well, good luck to you, right? And I was very respectful about it, but I didn't know who they were, and they're all calling me and saying they're going to beat me, right? So I had the primary. We won the primary. We had a general election. We won the general election, and in 2014, I ran unopposed. And so in the Senate, I started working on things that I saw with my own eyes in the community. Phil mentioned one. We talk about blight. Youngstown was built for 250,000 people. There's 70,000 people that live in it. So you're going to have a lot of abandoned properties. You're going to have a lot of blight, and you got to shrink the city. You got to knock down the places that need knocked down and revitalize and renovate the ones you can do and the ones you can fix. And so working with Phil and a lot of these guys on the ground, they said we got to get this land bank going. Cleveland has this. Cuyahoga has this. We got to get it in Mahoning County. We got to get this in Youngstown. We need it now. So immediately, we started bringing people like Phil down to the State House to lobby the legislature in order to get it done. We got that bill passed, and the land bank has done great things for the Valley since we were able to do that. Another thing that I saw with my own eyes, immediately I was going to all the different schools, right? I go to the public school, and then I go to the charter school next to it, and then I go to the Catholic schools that would have me. And the charter schools that I saw, for the most part, there were some good ones, but for the most part, I would see a situation like this. Old Catholic school that was empty for 10 years, bought up by ABC Academy. ABC Academy puts a bunch of desks and teachers in the room and calls it a school. But when I would go there, I didn't get a feel that there was real learning going on. I didn't get a feel that I didn't get an authentic feel. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, XYZ Academy was gone. They closed the doors, but they took all the money. But then ABC Academy would come in, and they just put a new sign over the sign that was there before. They just changed a couple things, called it a new school. So I started instantly talking about accountability and transparency bills when it comes to charter schools. And when it comes to education, if you're going to be a school and you're going to take state taxpayer dollars, you got to follow the same rules as the brick and mortar charter school down the street, or the brick and mortar public school down the street. So that was something that I've pushed, and I've continued to push for the last 6-7 years. Now we're on to e-schools with accountability and transparency for electronic learning, just like the public schools down the street. Another huge issue at home, and is an issue across the state, is job creation. And so we have an incubator downtown Youngstown now that we've really pushed to fund so that we can spin out these tech jobs that everybody talks about, right? And if you go to downtown Youngstown, you'll see we have the Youngstown Incubator, and right next door is Turning Technology, which is a business of 300-400 jobs where we have young people that are finally able to put their resume in from Youngstown State and go find those sales jobs and marketing jobs and all those jobs that they're going after right there in Youngstown. That comes from the incubator and comes from working together with people. The last thing that I saw immediately was the need for clean water initiatives. So I've continued to push for bond bills when it comes to clean water, when it comes to rebuilding our underground infrastructure, putting people to work, and making sure that we have clean water into the future. So those were things that I didn't learn about. Somebody didn't tell me about. Those are just things that I saw with my own eyes when I started in the Senate. And now I'm running for governor. And I'm running for governor because I believe that Ohio needs a change in leadership. And I believe I can drive the policy in order to build that stronger state. I'm running because I have a better vision for Ohio, and that vision has been molded from all of the experiences that I explained earlier. It's pretty simple, and it doesn't have to be so complex. When somebody works hard and they play by the rules, they deserve a fair shot in life. And anybody that works with the hopes of landing a good-paying job, they should be able to find one. And our kids deserve an education that prepares them for the future, no matter where they're from. You know, LGBT Ohioans deserve protections from senseless discrimination. For me, this is common sense stuff. Women deserve equal pay and reliable, affordable access to reproductive health care. And the state must provide Ohioans struggling with addiction the rehabilitation and support services in order to get their lives back on track. We also have to focus our efforts on crime and gun violence so that families feel safe again in our communities, and focus on that community policing initiatives that we need in order to regain trust in our communities with our law enforcement. Unfortunately, the reality that I've seen over the past 7 years down in the Senate is that many people don't get that fair shot anymore. And after 7 years of Governor Kasich in the Republican-controlled Senate and House, many of Ohio's problems have gotten worse. Every year, Ohio Republicans have allowed failing charter school owners to line their pockets on the backs of our children. And we've given billions of dollars in taxpayer kickbacks to the most wealthy. They've continued to attack women's rights by defunding Planned Parenthood and chipping away at women's right to choose. They've gone after workers' rights through privatization, weakening of Ohio's prevailing wage, and threats of right to work becoming a reality in the state. And they're constantly taking steps in the wrong direction when it comes to voting rights. So people ask me, Joe, what are you going to do in order to change this, right? You just identified a ton of problems. What are you going to do in order to build a stronger Ohio? What are you going to be able to do to make a difference? And I think you have to start with the most basic issue that we're dealing with in Columbus. Every year there's a major tax shift. The governor in the Republican-controlled legislature has made a decision to give income tax cuts to the highest earners. And that's always the priority of every yearly budget that we do. Kasich said in his last State of the State that we've given back $5.1 billion. He says in taxes, but it's really in income tax cuts, because what we've done is we've raised the state sales tax, we've starved out the local school districts and local governments, and so every local group has to go on the ballot and ask the people for more money, right? We need more money to help folks with disabilities. We need more money for our schools. We need more money for roads and bridge programs. We need more money for infrastructure for clean water. We need more money for everything because the state of Ohio has made a decision that we're not going to fund in those particular areas. So every day I talk to people across the state and I tell them that I'll put the state's resources where they belong. You know, investing in good quality jobs, providing clean water for future generations, giving the kids the opportunity to succeed, and freeing the communities from the scourges of heroin and blight. Currently, I've introduced 4 bills pending in the General Assembly. They'll combat these problems. They're not magical solutions, but it's a step in the right direction. This is work that I'm already doing as a state senator. This is work that I've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years. It's not campaign stuff, right? So I have an infrastructure bill that I've been pushing where we would actually go out, ask investors to come in, and have clean water bonds, right? So we can go in and we can rebuild the underground infrastructure throughout the state. Many large cities, most urban core cities have projects right now where they're going in and they have to upgrade the underground storm sewer systems and all the water systems. And so what they've been forced to do, because there's no dollars at the state level, is go ahead and raise fees when it comes to water and trash and then put that into these programs. But people don't appreciate that because they don't understand all the stuff I was just talking about. They just think it's an extra tax coming on them, and they say, well, we're already paying our taxes. So if we bonded out these dollars, it would be a long-term investment that the state would make and then pay it back over a series of years, similar to what we do with the Roads and Bridge program, similar to what we do with the Third Frontier program. It's something that Ohioans are used to and they understand. So I would ask that we would do that for underground infrastructure. Last year I had 3 Republican co-sponsors on it, and I hope we can get that through this year. There's a lot of issues when it comes to Lake Erie that aren't just Republican-Democrat issues. It's an issue for all Ohioans and down the Ohio River as well. I've also proposed legislation in order to remove dam removals and clean up green infrastructure projects in places like the Mahoning River. If you clean up these rivers, then you allow them to become free-flowing bodies of water where we can have the wildlife back that we once had before the mills in many of these industrial cores. It's simple stuff and it's not that expensive. People just don't move forward with the projects. You know, I have a job training bill where we would invest in internships between technical schools, between 2-year schools, between 4-year universities and the employers in the particular area, and have the state pay some of that salary for that intern so that the intern could live and it defrays the cost of this for the schools and the groups that are training. Businesses love this idea because businesses are complaining that we don't have job-ready people that are ready to come into the business. So let's develop that similar to what we do in the State House. We have LSC interns that come in and intern for a year. They make $30,000 a year, but 99% of them get placed as a legislative aide the next year. We're training them on what we need. We just have to grow programs like that. I mentioned this earlier, the e-school bill. Electronic schools, right? Right now, the way that they're paid is all the kid has to do is go in and check in the morning, and they get paid the same amount as the brick and mortar public school down the street. It's ridiculous. No measure of what's going on every single day. There's no measure to show what that child is doing other than that he checked in the morning, and they're getting paid for that, and they're getting paid a lot for that. Millions and millions of dollars, so much, and we've put in so much pressure that Governor Kasich has asked the Department of Education to go after ECOT for $60 million for overestimating how many kids are currently enrolled. Again, I'm not against the whole idea of choice for education, but I want to limit that to good quality choice. And I want to make sure that if we're paying state taxpayer dollars out, that we have some accountability in the system. And the final bill that I've really been pushing is this opioid bill. You know, this is the real deal here. We have major problems in every community in the state. In order to deal with heroin, we have to make sure that we have police force on the ground that can deal with it. So properly funding our police force, properly funding our local governments in a way that they can be flexible in how they want to use this dollars. You know, whether it's Cuyahoga County, they have different issues than Carroll County. So we give them resources and we allow them to be flexible in the spending, right? Not only that, but we invest in education on the front end and rehabilitation with real wraparound services on the back end. When I go to places, some people don't love this idea. And they say, I don't want to pay for that guy's bad decision. I didn't make a decision to become a heroin addict, therefore I don't want my taxpayer dollars to go pay for that. And I normally get a question like that. And I say to that person, you're going to pay one way or another. The problem is so bad that you're going to pay to incarcerate or you're going to pay to rehabilitate. And so you can make that decision, and you can make that decision if you don't want to pay to rehabilitate. You may pay when they break into your car or your house because this addiction takes over your life. And a lot of these people aren't meant to be. They didn't want to become heroin addicts. They were workers' comp guys that I represented that had a torn rotator cuff that took the drug just like they were supposed to, and then they got cut off by the BWC, and then now they become heroin addicts. Or they're a kid that made a horrible decision at a party to take a pill, which was stupid, but they didn't want to become heroin addicts. Those are some of my brother's friends. And they've gone through hell and back with their family in order to beat this addiction. And so it's real, and it's going to keep happening unless we do something about it. I've also asked the Attorney General to go after the drug manufacturers because they made a lot of promises that this was non-addictive stuff in order to deal with pain management. Now, that's an uphill battle, but we should go down that route in order to get it done. You know, I want to get, the last few minutes, I just want to talk about how people, as I travel, people will say, you know, how does a 37-year-old guy from Youngstown win? You know, and how do you get this done, Joe? And I tell them that, you know, I'm the only candidate on either side of the aisle that can talk to these blue-collar workers that voted for Obama, that then flip to Trump and bring them back to the party, right? I know these voters because the voters live down the street from me, right? There are a lot of my friends' fathers, right, that I have to have these conversations with every day. And we're working through it. And we work through it by talking about things that we have in common. That's why I talk about job creation. That's why I talk about schools. That's why I talk about neighborhoods. I don't go in there and say, hey, you voted for Trump, you know, you're deplorable. That's not going to work, right? We're not going to start there. You start with things that you can work through together, and you try to build. When I go to a lot of these forums, people say, Joe, you're the first politician that I trust and believe in because you're not like a politician at all. That means a lot to me. If people keep saying that, then I know I'm doing the right things. And I need to inspire Ohioans to get involved. You know, I do this by telling it like it is and building trust and bringing people's voices to the governor's office. I'll always be direct, and I'll always answer the tough questions because that's what Ohioans deserve. I listen to people, not the pundits or the special interests. And I've always tried to work on issues together with the opposing party. But if I don't like something that the governor's doing, if I don't like something that the president's doing, I'll call him out. Like, I don't like the fact that Trump's thinking about cutting initiatives for funding like Medicare, Medicaid, and clean water initiatives, because if we do, the state is going to have a huge hole that we're going to have to fill in order to provide affordable quality health care to people and make sure that we have those initiatives in place. So I'll be fighting against that. You know, I mean it when I say I'll fight for the rights of all Ohioans, no matter who they voted for in the last election. You know, we need to put our differences aside first and work together towards building a stronger Ohio. I know that I have to earn every single vote. And that's why I'm going to a lot of these places that aren't the traditional path for a Democratic candidate for governor. You know, we've gone in the past 3 months to so many different communities that they'll say, this is the first time a gubernatorial candidate has ever been here in front of us. That's how I know that we're making this we're carving a different path, but one that is very, very workable. You know, we were in Springfield last night. The night before, we were in a place called Thornville, right, Monica? At the Fireside Pizza House with 40 women that wanted to talk about issues that were important to them. We're going to keep going to those events every single night. And hopefully, you know, this is just the beginning of a relationship with many of you in the city of Cleveland. And I'm looking forward to the next part where I can answer some questions and we can kind of grow and build a little bit more. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'll step aside for Phil and then come back.
Today we are enjoying the first forum of our Ohio 2018 Meet the Candidates series, a Friday forum with Senator Joe Schiavoni, Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio. We're about to begin the audience Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, or those of you joining us via our radio broadcast, webcast, or live simulcast at the Parma Snow Branch of the Cuyahoga County Public Library. If you'd like to tweet a question, please tweet it at the City Club, and our staff will try to work it into the program. We want to remind you that questions should be brief and to the point. Holding the microphones today are Content Coordinator Teddy Eisenberg and Marketing and Outreach Coordinator Faye Walker. Faye is over there. Okay. May we have the first question, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Merle Johnson. I'm a state school board member, and I appreciated your comment about you're not against choice, but you want quality choice for our children. And that's the issue. So last year, the National NAACP passed a resolution asking for a moratorium on charter schools because of all the reasons that you've named and many more. My question to you is, and I looked it up, and it seems that governors can do executive orders. So would you be willing to do an executive order, if that was legal, to put a moratorium on charter schools so that the system can get cleaned up by hopefully an attorney general and state auditor, if we get the right ones elected, who would be willing to do that?
That's a good question, and I think that it would be an option, but I think a better one would be to continue to drill into accountability and transparency standards so that we can make sure that we don't have new charter schools popping up because they can't pop up unless they have a track record of doing good things for kids. And maybe putting a moratorium on for-profit charter schools would be the most accurate way to do that. But because I would hate to do that for all charter schools, because I see the ones that work the best are the ones that have a strong foundation, that they're using those state dollars, but they also have a lot of foundation and they have a lot of people that believe in the product. Therefore, they're not in it to make money. They're in it to educate kids in a different way. So I think that a moratorium for-profit would make sense, but I think continuing to have real people come testify about what's going on in most of these places is a very accurate way to get the job done, and legislators are starting to listen.
Just to tailcoat on what we were talking about before the program, immigrants and refugees have an outstanding record in terms of starting their own businesses, job creation, and being a real asset to the economy. If you're elected governor, would you sit down with Joe Simperman of Global Cleveland and see what Cleveland and Ohio, as a whole for that matter, could do to enhance more immigrants coming here?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'll sit with anybody to talk about any issue on the front end because that's how you get things done. But yes, I think we absolutely need to encourage immigration in a way that is sensible but is safe, right? So you have the proper background checks. You have people go through the proper channels in order to make sure that they're coming over here for the right reasons. And once you establish that, you want to integrate them in communities like Cleveland and Youngstown because we need this. We need that kind of outside perspective of the world in communities, especially I think about Youngstown. You know, we need to have fresh eyes on things so that we can continue to grow. So of course it's worth a conversation and trying to figure out a way to get that done.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you very much for coming, and I really enjoyed your remarks. You touched on what I'm going to ask towards the end of your talk, and I'd like you to try to expand on this a little bit more. As you know, some 215 counties nationwide that had voted for Barack Obama twice flipped and voted for Trump in the last election, including Trumble County, which is adjacent to your county, Mahoning. And Mahoning went very close to going for Trump. Sure. So you talked about, reaching out to these people. Where specifically are you going, and what specifically are you saying to these Trump Democrats to get them back to vote Democratic next year? Because I don't see how any Democrat can win without them.
You're 100% right. And that's why I'm in one of the 3 C's right now, but on March 1st, when I announced, I didn't run to the 3 C's to try to get out the vote, right? That's what most Democrats try to do. They look at the population base and then they try to go to those places and they just spend all their time trying to get out the vote. But what we started doing is going to a lot of the Youngstown-like places. So I went to Mansfield. I went to Lima. I went to Sandusky. We went to Shelby. We went to Marion. We went up and down the river from Ashtabula to Steubenville and all the way down. And we're talking to people about things that are important to them and actually listening. You know, the biggest concern I had about this event was speaking for a half hour on the front end, because I'm used to going for 5 minutes and then answering questions for 2 hours. And so that's how you build relationships. And when people say, you know, what are you doing here? You say, I'm here to listen to you. And their eyes light up, and as long as you show them that you mean that by your action, then that's how you build relationships. You know, I had a good relationship with a lot of these folks from Senate Bill 5. If you remember the collective bargaining bill, I would just happen to be sitting on that committee as the ranking member when the bill got dropped down. So then I traveled the state with Senator Yuko and Representative Celebrezze, and we worked on making sure that we got people to understand the bill and then work through it. So when I'm going back to a lot of these places, they remember me from that. A lot of the police, firemen, teachers, all the public employees, they might have voted for Trump. Who knows? Doesn't matter. Those people are on board in order to join hands and lock arms in order to move forward with my race. So that's how I'm trying to do it. There's a year to get this done before the primary. 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans so far.
Senator, the 2010 census showed that Ohio's population had become relatively stagnant compared to the rest of the country, and that we have become older and poorer and less well educated.
Sicker.
And sicker. Good point. So the term of the next governor is about 2 years into that term. We're looking at another census. Do you have any thoughts about what the governor's office and the state government can do to reverse some of those trends?
Well, obviously we have to attract people to want to move to our communities across the state. You know, most business people, when I talk to them, they first highlight the fact that they love that we have the lake, they love that we have the Ohio River, they love that you can drive from Chicago to New York and it's right in the middle, most of these places. And so the location they love. But we have a lot of work to do when it comes to brownfield restoration and cleaning up these dirty properties, because they go from one to another and another, and they say, well, I can't build here. It's going to take $5 million to clean up the ground, and it's going to take me 3 years. So as a state, I've worked with guys like Phil, and I've worked with these revitalization folks that say, we got to clean up these brownfields so that when we have businesses that want to come here, we can bring them to 10 places in an hour in every community and say, come here. And then we get those young people involved. We get those jobs here, so people that go to Cleveland State, Kent, Akron, Youngstown State, all these areas, all these smaller colleges, they can stay in their hometowns. That's the way that we have to do it. I mean, I have 3 younger brothers, and 2 of them live in Columbus and 1 lives in Denver. Columbus is doing very well in growing and bringing these jobs to the areas, but the rest of the state is struggling a little bit. Cincinnati's doing pretty well too, but if you look at the numbers at least, it shows that the rest of the state is losing population. So we have to incentivize people to stay. You have to make sure that we have jobs, people to work. You know, there's an interesting bill that I saw in Maryland, and I have my staff drafting something right now. But I don't know I don't have any data to show that it really has worked because they just passed it. But the bill says that if you graduate from a state university and you buy a home within one of these areas that the government is highlighting, then we, the state, will pay for half of your student debt. Maybe an interesting way to keep people at home. Maybe an interesting way to incentivize people moving in these tipping point neighborhoods. Things like that, I think you got to think outside of the box a little bit.
Senator Schiavoni, Bill Mastriani with the firefighters. You made reference to the rainy day fund and cuts to the local governments. With these cuts and with the federal government due to sunset the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response staffing and assistance of firefighter grants in 2018, do you have a plan, and if so, what is it to help the local fire departments and all the safety forces?
Well, I think generally, if you fund local governments properly, then your safety forces will have the funding necessary in order to have adequate amount of staffing, have new workable equipment for you that's safe, and you go through one by one, community after community, and you highlight what they need, and then you help them supply that need to the community. And so I think it's about increasing the local government fund and targeting specific areas that the local government can use things for. You know, people, you can't just, Democrats are accused of spending a lot of money, right? You just want to spend all this money. Like I'll hear, all my bills cost money. Yeah, they cost money. It costs money to have good service on the ground when it comes to police and fire. It costs money to have good quality schools. It costs money to rehabilitate people. We have to do it. We just have to shift from the tax cutting policy to an investment policy, but one that people can see and feel. Because if they have those protection services that they need, then and the roads are good and things in their community, they feel safe, then they're not opposed to paying their tax. It's when they highlight that wasteful spending that you have a problem. So you got to make sure you have a workable system, but absolutely makes sense to give you the opportunity to get what you need to protect us, and I appreciate what you do.
Hi. Since Governor Kasich has taken office, he's signed about 20 bills into law to limit and restrict access to women's health. Just sort of horrifying that women are considered a special interest group since we're half the population. If you become governor, what would you commit to rolling back on those restrictions, as well as what would you commit to work proactively to increase access to women's health?
So let's talk about this practically, right? So the General Assembly, the House and the Senate is made up of almost 2/3 Republicans and 1/3 Democrats, okay? But as a governor, you have the power to veto. Kasich, to his credit, vetoed the 6-week ban on abortion, but allowed the 20-week to pass. Not to his credit, right? So, in my opinion, as governor, there would be no bills that I would sign. I would not sign a bill that limited a woman's right to choose, that limited or cut funding for Planned Parenthood and all of these things that have been vilified by a lot of the far right. But Planned Parenthood, I mean, my wife went to Planned Parenthood as a college student in order to learn about what she needed to do in order to keep herself healthy. She's not going in there to get an abortion. 99% of the things that they do there are non-abortion procedures. So we got to be real with people and tell people the facts. You know, it is hard for me to say that I would be able to help the issue as a governor in order to provide more rights, but I could definitely limit the damage because I wouldn't allow anything to pass through, and they would have to, they meaning the Republican legislature, if they wanted to, they would have to override that line item veto, which would take 2/3 of the House and Senate. That's a super complicated answer, but I want to be real with you because I could just stand up here and say, absolutely, because in my heart, that's what I would want to do, but I have to be realistic that, and Nick and Kenny will tell you, we're probably not going to pick up the House and the Senate as Democrats in 2018, regardless of what happens at the statewide. Maybe we pick up some seats, but we don't flip the chambers. So you have to work with people on both sides. And so, of course, you try to work through it on the front end, and having that balance between a Democratic governor or Republican legislature would foster an environment where you have to have more conversations on the front end because they don't want you vetoing everything. You don't want to have to veto everything. You want to work together to find some sensible solutions. So you can be effective in that manner just by the simple balance structure that would be set up. Yes.
For 35 years, Americans have been told that government is the problem and that deregulated capitalism is the solution to everything. Your proposals suggest much greater faith in the role of government and government programs. So how do you persuade people that government is part of the solution?
That's the question is similar to the one that Bill had. I mean, you have to show people that their taxes are going to things that matter to them. You have to show people that their dollars are being invested properly. You have to, people are so upset when they drive down the streets and they have potholes, right? Fix the roads. Fix the storm water sewer systems, right? So that we don't have these monster things that happen. Fix the lead pipes underneath the ground. In Sebring, Ohio, we had lead contamination in water. And it's because we have lead pipes underneath, which most of us do across the state, but nobody knows about it until the pH of the water gets screwed up, and then it eats the pipe, and then the pipe goes into the cup of water. And then they just go, well, we'll just fix it. We'll just put some more stuff in the water, and that will stop the pipe from getting eaten, and it won't go in your water anymore. And then everybody goes, oh, fine. But we still have lead pipes. You know, we still have busted up roads. We still have heroin that is a huge problem growing every day. So you put money in place. You put money in place to develop programs that matter to people. It's tricky. It's very tough, and the other side will always try to shoot holes in that. But if you can reach people and show people that their dollars are being spent in a way that they think is proper and that they feel that benefit from and to, then that's how you get it done. But you can't roll out willy-nilly, undeveloped programs and watch them blow up. That's how you start off on the wrong foot. You know, you got to have a very well-developed system and roll out these programs in a way that people understand and people feel.
Hello, I'm Tess Kelly. I was with the essay contest, and I am an avid slam poet. And I was wondering how you feel about funding for the arts and if you think that supporting the arts is helpful to the economy.
Thank God you asked that question. I thought you were going to say, how do you feel about slam poetry? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I don't know what that is. We'll talk about it after. Okay. So art, funding art, that's way easier. All right. Yes. The problem that I see in schools today and educating kids is that, you know, we're kind of treating everybody the same. It's like we're treating kids like we're trying to build cars or something. And it doesn't make sense. Every kid is different. Every kid has strengths and weaknesses. Every kid wants to be able to use their God-given talents in a way that makes them happy, right? And gives them an opportunity to succeed in life. And if we're just teaching kids to the test, and we're not funding arts, and we're not funding speech and debate, and we're not funding, you know, sports, and we're not funding things that give people and young people outlets, then we're running into an issue where we're trying to cookie cutter every single kid. That doesn't work. So absolutely, all the extracurricular activities in schools are something that are very, very important to preserve. But slam poetry, Dan, thank you.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for coming. I'm Debbie Edson, Cleveland citizen. And I was just wondering how you feel about where you stand on gerrymandering. And as governor, what would you do to change, if anything, that process?
So let's go into, you know, last year, we all voted on a measure that would change the state lines, okay? Just for the state house and for the state senate. So in 2021, the lines will be recut. And because of the bill that all of you, it was a bill and then became a ballot initiative or a ballot issue, you voted for that. The state lines will be more fair, okay, based on that bill. It's not going to be totally fixed, but there's a bunch of safeguards in place that you can't totally gerrymander the state lines anymore. With that being said, that doesn't do anything for the congressionals. And we live in a state that people say it's 50-50, not according to the last election, but I'd say it's 50-50. And you have, you know, 12-4 in Congress. And so we need to make sure that we have lines that are drawn properly for Congress. But the state legislature has to do that. And they're not going to do that. They're not going to give up that huge lead in Congress. So what you've seen is some citizens' initiatives moving forward. That's the way that this gets done. You know, we're very lucky because our state constitution allows for initiatives and a referendum. So if you don't like the fact that your legislators won't do anything, you could do it. If you don't like a bill that they passed, you could stop it. The only problem is it's very expensive and it takes a great deal of organization in order to get the signatures necessary and then talk to the people about the issue in a way that makes sense to them so that they vote for your issue when the other side is dropping bombs on you, right? And so that's the situation here, but I think that it will happen because a lot of these good government groups are really organized now and they're really working. And most people, they're a little sick of the political nonsense. Democrats did the same thing. When Democrats had the power, they did the same thing. And that was a bad decision. But it was a decision that was made at that particular time. And so when the Republicans got the pen back, they drew it. And so there's the initiative, there's the bill that we passed last year, but there's also, the apportionment board draws the lines, which is the governor, the secretary of state, the auditor, and some legislative leaders. So if we have some balance there in the 2018 election, that will create balance in the lines. And so that is a question that only real inside political people like you ask, but it's one that is very, very important because it dictates who's going to lead. Uh-oh. Now the minority leader in the Senate's about to ask me a question.
Well, if you're expecting a softball, you're going to get more like a grenade, my friend. Senator, 6 years ago, we had a new governor come in. We had local government funds that were well-funded. We have a lot of mayors, city council members here who had the ability to provide necessary services for their residents. We had a rainy day fund that was rather low. Right now, things have switched. The current governor is taking our local government funds, brought them way down to an all-time low, taking our rainy day fund, increased it to over $5 billion. The next governor is going to be on Front Street. You're going to have the same elected officials that are here in the room listening today, reaching out because they need help.
Right.
At the same token, people will be watching what's going to happen to that rainy day fund and why. What can we expect from the next governor?
Well, if I was fortunate enough to win, I would not spend the rainy day fund down to zero. I think that would be irresponsible. But I think there's some serious issues that need to be addressed, and you have over $2 billion sitting in a pot that is sitting in Columbus, and we can be spending it and investing in drugs. We can be investing in the fact that we have a $400 million hole in the budget. And so if you don't fill that hole, then you have to cut places, and they're going to go back to local governments. They're going to go back to schools. They're going to go back to the same places because that's the only place to go. So you have to utilize that fund to deal with rainy days every single day, right? Because that's what's occurring. But you have to be responsible about it. And you can't just say, well, we got $2 billion, let's make it happen over here, right? You got to make sure that you're doing it in a way, going back to your question and your question, that makes sense to people and truly addresses the needs of people. And so that's where I would go with it. And you'll still be around, so we'll work on some bills together.
Senator over here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Sean Brennan, President of Parma City Council and very proud public school teacher. So as we all know, Senate Bill 5 failed. They tried to destroy our unions. So now, as been alluded to already this morning, the Republicans have slashed the local government fund to local governments. They've cut funding for public schools and diverted funds from public schools. So it's my theory that since Senate Bill 5 didn't work, this is their way of destroying our unions, redistributing wealth from the middle class to to their cronies. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
You're right on the money. I mean, I'll tell you that Senate Bill 5 was, let's go for it all. And that didn't work. So what they've done a lot, and I'm not saying all Republicans want to destroy unions. That would be an overstatement, right? But the majority, they're pushing pieces of legislation that are 1 inch at a time. Talking about the Youngstown plan is a good example. I mean, overnight, they decided, they meaning legislative leaders, Governor Kasich and a few people from Youngstown, decided they were going to take over the schools, get rid of the school board, and just have a CEO in place, and that CEO can make any decision that he or she wants. This is America, right? That's one thing, because those 400 teachers, or how many teachers work there, Larry? 518, those 518 teachers are no longer going to have the ability to collectively bargain if the CEO makes a decision that he thinks that's a bad idea. That's going after labor one step at a time. Privatizing food service and prisons. How about that one, right? Take over the food service in prison. They tell all the people that are serving the food in the prisons that have been there for 20, 25 years, you guys could either go back, train to become prison guards, or hit the road. Or you could work for Aramark and you could make $9.50 an hour. Okay? You lose a lot of good union jobs. How about privatization of developmental centers in Montgomery County and Mahoning County? People with severe disabilities being taken care of, state employees taking care of them every single day, pouring their heart and soul into the care for these people. State last year says we're closed at Montgomery and Mahoning. If you want to stay in a facility, you got to go up to Warrensville. And if you don't want to stay in a facility, then you can go into a group home setting. And all the workers that work here, you could either go work in the group home setting, or you can go up to Warrensville or one of these places if there's room. Group home setting, average salary, $10.20. 29 hours a week so they don't have to pay health care. At least that was what was happening a lot. My mother-in-law works at one of these places, so I know. This is how they've gone about one step at a time. Now, Phil is creeping up on me here, which means that body slam Montana style is coming if I don't figure this out. But that's the answer, and I'm worried about that. But those issues are small enough that it doesn't incite everybody across the state, but large enough that it really impacts people's lives. And so that's a good question, and I'm glad that you asked that, because it shows kind of the inch-by-inch approach rather than going for the whole deal. So is that it? That's it. All right, Dan, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Well, because IdeaStream's not going to pick up on the physical act of a body slam, we will close with some slam poetry, perhaps. So today at the City Club, we have been enjoying the first forum of our Ohio 2018 Meet the Candidates series, a Friday forum with Senator Joe Schiavoni, Democratic candidate for governor of Ohio. We thank Senator Schiavoni and all of you for being here, and have a great Memorial Day weekend.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream are made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.